Welcome to part 2 of redecking. I'm How To Bob. In the first part, we removed all of the old dry rotted wood decking on this deck here. Most of the joists are in pretty good shape, good enough to redeck. The deck's not real high off the ground, so it'll be easy to redeck this deck. We still have to remove the steps, you can see here, and then we'll start the redecking process after that. First, I'm going to go around and remove all the nails and screws. There's a combination of screws, nails, different style screws, rusted screws. There's all kinds of different fasteners holding this decking, the old decking down. A lot of them are rusted out, so they will come out with a pry bar or a hammer. So I've got a multitude of ways that I'm going to remove these old fasteners that didn't come out with the decking board. And you can see there's a bunch of different types, and many of them came out when I pulled the decking out, but I still need to go through and remove all of the ones that stayed in. Then I can start removing the steps. So I'll take out all the screws that I can see holding the steps, the treads in place. And once I do that, I can get my pry bar and pry the treads off of the stringers. They come off fairly easy. Once I get one set off, I can start using the hammer and pulling the other ones off. Just by getting underneath makes it a whole lot easier. And when I get to the very top back tread, that's going to be a little more difficult because there's a post that the tread is stuck underneath. So I'm going to cut the top tread in half right along here, and then I can pull that out from underneath. You can see a little notch in it. So now I've got this set of steps stripped down, and the rest of the deck is all stripped. So I'm going to start by cutting the end of the decking off, and you see why, because it breaks fairly easy at the end. I like to get a nice clean cut. Then I can make my measurement for my stair tread and cut that to size, and I'll cut a few of them while I'm here since they're all going to be the same length. I do like to cut the ends of the decking off when I run the decking down the deck as well, not just on the stair treads, because it's drier on the ends and it's not as strong. So to keep it from splitting out when I put the screws in, I'll cut the end of the decking board off usually. So I've got all my pieces cut. You can see the way the grain of the wood's going. You want it cupped down so that it doesn't try to peel up or curl up on the ends. So I'll put the grain cupped down, and then I'm going to use some 2.5 inch decking fasteners to screw all of my deck boards in. They're rated for the treated lumber that I'll be using for the decking, and I'll put one on each side. I have to measure this one because my stringer's about this far back, but typically what I like to do is put it about 1 inch away from the end of the decking board. By putting it about 1 inch back from the end of the decking board, it keeps it from splitting out, but yet it holds the decking board down, keeps it from cupping or curling when holding it down. And I'm going to use 2 fasteners in each deck board, and I'll do that throughout the whole process. And we're we're just going to surface screw all these in. Nothing fancy, no hidden fasteners. And just countersink the screws just below the surface. And I have to measure this stringer back about that far. Moving up the steps. I like to do the steps first. That way I can carry my deck boards up to the deck when I get ready to put the boards on the deck. Again, measuring back for the stringer. And I'll slightly tilt it back, go in at an angle for that screw. And I keep my deck boards tight together. Over time they will dry out and the gap in between them will increase. Okay, now this one needs pushed in a little bit, so I'm going to use a 2x4 as a pry bar, and I'll step on it, and with the screw started, I'll pry on the 2x4 and then put my screw in, and that'll keep the two treads tight together. You can see I've notched this out around the posts. You can use the old one as a template, which I did. Slide that into place. And then screw down just like all the other deck threads on the steps. Now on the sides, I'm going to have to try and put a screw at an angle to go underneath the post. The post will hold most of it down, but I like to put 2 screws in each side, so I will use that screw at an angle. Put that one in an angle as well. Okay, got the steps complete. Now it's time to start laying out some decking. I'm going to start at the house side. I'm going to measure all the way over, find my dimension that I want to start with, line it up with the end of the deck, and you can see I have a downspout that I have to cut out here. So I'll use my speed square and draw my line. This one just gets notched out. That's how the old decking board was. So I've got my lines where the downspout is located. Measure the distance that it comes out from the house and transpose that measurement to my decking board. And then I can cut the 2 lines on either side for the downspout. Once I get those cut, I'm going to use my jigsaw or saber saw and just do a cut around the end here, and then I'll run it up the side until the piece of wood falls out. Then I can come back and do my straight cut on the depth side, and again up the side where the circular saw couldn't reach. And there we go, we have the notch. Just check and see if it fits. I'm going to push it in a little bit harder with a piece of wood, and then I can start to screw in my decking board. I've got it up tight against the house as far as I can go. This one is curled a little bit, so I'm going to use a screwdriver and push it into the joist, and then put my screw in. I'll do that several times throughout this process because I want to keep the deck boards tight. Like I said, when the deck boards dry out, they will pull apart somewhat. So I will have some spacing that will be gained once the boards dry out. So I just want to make sure that the deck boards are tight up against each other as I go through the process. And once I get those tight up against the house, now this one needs to be pried over a little bit. You can see it moves in just a little bit, and then I can screw it in while I'm holding it in place and then continue on. Not every spot needs to be pried in, but it's handy that I have a screwdriver right next to me in case that particular part does. Now there's another downspout for this area here. I'm going to mark that. Make sure I got it marked good so I can see it. This one's going to go through the middle. It's not going to be notched because it's a little bit further out. Make sure my measurements are good. I measured the downspout, and I have to be 1.5 inches at least away from the end of the deck board because the frame of the deck is there. Next, I'm going to use a 1-inch flat bit and drill a hole on each corner where I marked for the downspout. And once I get it lined up here, once I get all 4 corners drilled, I'll use my saber saw and just connect the holes together, and I'll leave the corners rounded. That'll give a nice fit to the downspout that I'll be putting back in. Last cut, and then I can pull my piece of plug out of here, plug of wood, and we'll try the downspout. It's a good tight fit, lines up very well with the drain, so I can continue screwing my deck into place. I've got the end of the board meeting halfway across the joist. Put a couple screws in that area. I'm going to stagger the joints where the ends of the decking meet so that none of them are on the same line. And I'll show you that after I get a few rows done. I'll do random spacing on these decking joints. And again, I'm going to be using 2 decking screws. These are 2.5-inch decking screws that I'll be using. I'll use 2 per joist. And this board fits in pretty good. Don't need to pry it over. On the ends, I'm going at a slight angle so that I'm not too close to the end of the decking board so that it doesn't split out. I've got to notch this board here around some electrical conduit. So I'm going to mark my sides. Then I'll measure the depth of the conduit and transpose that measurement over to my deck board. Then I'll use the jigsaw, cut to the line on either side where the conduit goes. And then I'll simply remove that plug by hitting it with a hammer. It's a short run, so the wood splits right on the grain. Then I can slide my decking board right over the conduit and start screwing it in again. And I'll usually start at one end of the deck board and then work my way down. That way, if it needs to be pried in, I can start a screw, get my screwdriver, and pry it in towards the house or the other previous deck board, just to keep them all tight and in line. So I have a few more deck boards installed, and I have the joints staggered. Got one here that's curled a little bit, so I'll start a screw and work my screwdriver underneath and pry it over as hard as I can. So there was a new pool installed around the upper part of this deck, and we'll go over how we're going to go around that in the next part of this series. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon. I'm How To Bob. Thanks for watching.